Which makes me start to doubt the point of this whole channel. Your build is going to start to look absolutely sick. What is up, guys? Welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and in today's video we're going to be building an awesome RTX 3070 Ti gaming PC build. With plenty of goodies in from the guys at Gigabyte Aorus. We've also got a really nice mesh RGB case, a CPU cooler with a screen, and plenty of other awesome hardware. I'm going to run you through the build process today from start through to finish, go over all the parts we selected, and then look in detail at the performance of this 3070 Ti. So without any further ado, let's just dive straight into it. Today's video has been made possible by Seagate and their exciting global gaming event which they're hosting on the 24th of June. You can watch it live on YouTube or Twitch and you don't want to miss it, as they'll be looking at the latest trends in PC gaming, focusing specifically on PCIe Gen 4, how it could unlock faster speeds, better graphics and overall a much better gaming experience. With partners like Razer, MSI and AMD all tuning in for the fun as well, you don't want to miss out and you can tune in at the links in the description below. At the heart of any gaming PC build, we have of course got our processor, or our CPU. For this system, I've gone Team Ryzen, which is what I'd recommend everybody do for a high-end build in 2021. Specifically, this is the Ryzen 9 5900X. There is also a more expensive 5950X, but this is basically impossible to get hold of, and it's also a little bit overkill for today's build, even more overkill than the Ryzen 9. Now, in order to keep the CPU cool, we do need a good aftermarket CPU cooler. No stock cooler is going to work with this Ryzen 9 chip, and that's where the Gigabyte WaterForce X240 comes in. There is a 360mm option, but you will need a bigger case that definitely can facilitate that, and a longer graphics card. So for us, this cooler with its built-in display is going to do the job really nicely. Storage for today's build is provided by Samsung's latest 980 Pro. It's a Gen 4 NVMe drive with speeds in the region of 7 gigabytes per second, while 32 gigabytes of GEIL RGB RAM is going to look great. We haven't gone for the red kit that's on the box, we have instead gone for a more neutral gunmetal grey, which should match the build aesthetic a lot better today. For power, we've got an 850 watt power supply from our friends at DeepCool. They make some awesome power supplies at some great budget value price points, and it will work really well today. For a 3070 Ti and a 3080 Ti, you need at least 750, but I'd recommend 850 watts of power. A couple of our final components then include an X570 Aorus master motherboard. This is a higher end X570 board and will be a better choice than B550 for the Ryzen 9 CPU. You can learn more about that in our dedicated review in the cards now and linked in the description below. While an RTX 3070 Ti provides all the graphical horsepower we're going to need for this system. The 3070 Ti is actually, in my view, a pretty good card, despite what a lot of people have said. I wouldn't bother so much with the 3080 Ti as it's just too expensive. But if you're after a 3070 with a bit more power without paying 3080 prices, then this will work well. I understand that the current state of the market is really not good for buying a GPU, but we still think it's important to evaluate the performance of these new cards and show you guys a build which hopefully in a few months' time you'll be able to put together. I don't want to forget as well the case choice for today's build, which comes in from Cougar. It's their MX660 Mesh ARGB. It's got a nice mesh front for plenty of airflow and some addressable RGB fans. That's enough of the parts though, let's go ahead and get our system put together and see sort of how good it looks when it's all built up. Kicking things off by installing as many components into the motherboard as possible. Just as I install the M.2 Gen 4 SSD, I just want to comment on how much of a fan I am of this Aorus motherboard. Justifying a kind of higher end X570 board is quite difficult in 2021 against the landscape of really good B550 options. But Gigabyte have pretty much nailed it with this board and give you a real reason to justify the extra cash of an X570 board over B550. The I/O is really solid, the physical design is nice, and it's not quite as expensive as some of like the extreme options on the market. So all around, it's a good high-end motherboard with an actual high-end feature set. One thing that you definitely want to keep in mind when it comes to X570 motherboards is that you go for fast memory. It's the same on B550 and really for any Ryzen CPU. If you don't go for at least 3600 megahertz, you will see a tangible performance hit, sometimes up to 20% in the biggest titles out there. He's got the memory the wrong way around. There was a 50% chance. There we go. And you can actually see this RAM is it's like Ryzen certified, which is something I've never seen before, but I guess it's beneficial for our AMD oriented system today. So straight off the bat, the RAM looks like it kind of fits in well actually with the motherboard aesthetic. You've got this really nice shielding on the back, which will help to protect the motherboard from idiots like me punching it away, and all in all, looks great, I think. Picking a good case choice in 2021 is actually really difficult. With so much competition on the market, it can be a bit of a daunting decision, but this Cougar case fits the bill well. The build quality is good, it's got a load of mesh on it. It just works really nicely for a build like this one. So let's go ahead and get the motherboard installed, and then we can move on to the CPU cooler, which is often the most painful bit of any process. But we haven't got to worry about that just yet. Let's focus on the motherboard for now. Our lovely CPU cooler then is the next component in today's system, and it's actually a liquid cooler from Gigabyte. Now, I know that's a little bit wild, you probably weren't expecting that, and it has a screen built in. Aorus weren't the first people to do this, but it does look pretty good actually. I think this one is actually rotatable as well, it is indeed, so that depending on the orientation of the water block, the screen is always going to be the right way around. A 240mm rad is going to be good enough for a Ryzen 9. A 360 is always worth considering though for hotter, more powerful CPUs. And I know that, I don't want to sound inappropriate, chaps, but the tubes on this cooler they're very girthy, they're very thick. I don't know how much water's actually going through these, but they look immense. So let's go ahead and install the radiator at the top of the case and figure out how on earth we get the water block on. I genuinely have no idea. And then it's a simple case of popping on a dab of thermal paste and securing the water block nicely into place. This isn't a detailed step-by-step tutorial, but if you'd like to see one of those, there's one live on the channel now, which you can watch in the card section now or in the description below. And that brings us nicely on to the graphics card. Now, I know recommending an RTX 3000 series card, or basically any GPU, which makes me start to doubt the point of this whole channel in 2020. I'm joking. Recommending a GPU, though, in 2021 is really difficult, and it makes our lives here really tricky. We're very lucky that we get to work with the likes of Gigabyte and Nvidia, and they very kindly lend us out GPUs for videos like this one. But it isn't particularly enjoyable for us to go ahead and recommend things you just can't buy. The 3070 Ti is the latest GPU that you can't buy, but it is actually a really fantastic card. It plugs a gap that we'd seen for a little while start to emerge between the RTX 3070 and the RTX 3080. It bridges the gap between 1440p high frame rate and 4K high frame rate gaming with a card that slots perfectly in the middle. With faster memory than its little brother, the standard 3070, but still a really great feature set, it works well for the build, with support for, of course, the latest ray tracing and DLSS 2.0 technologies. This Gigabyte card actually comes in fairly close to MSRP as well, which is awesome to see, especially when demand returns to normal, and it's good to see that Gigabyte aren't taking advantage of the current kind of scalping situation. With a really nice backplate on the back here and a cooler design with 3 fans, the card should stay nice and cool, something the founder's 3070 Ti did struggle with a little bit, so it'll be interesting to see exactly how this compares. This case technically does have a vertical GPU mount, but given the extra thickness on the card, it's not going to fit, which is fine, so we'll go ahead and use the standard GPU installation orientation, a little something like this, and you can see now why I didn't go for a front-mounted radiator, as it would have been a little bit tight. And once that's in, your build is going to start to look absolutely sick. There's one more component we do need to cover off though before we wrap up today's video, and that's the power supply. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but it's an 850 watt unit with an 80+ gold certification that's going to work really well for this system. Neutral black tack cables will also kind of blend in a sea of black and RGB, so it will work perfectly today. Plus the power supply shield built into this Cougar case keeps it nice and hidden away. Let's go ahead though and get our power supply installed, do a bit of cable management, whack those side panels on, and then boot our machine up to see how good it looks and then how well it performs. So hang around and don't go anywhere because it's about to get a little bit spicy. Lovely jubbly, now we've seen just how good this system looks when it's all powered up, let's take a dive and see exactly how it performs. As always, on your screen now is a snapshot, a summary view of all the different titles we tested out, some of the biggest games out there, and the results we were able to achieve. The full gaming benchmark runs for all titles can be found in the playlist in the cards section now, but as ever, let's take a closer look at some of our games today, kicking off with GTA 5. At 1440p in the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode, we got an impressive 171 FPS on average, with all of our numbers gathered in both Nvidia's FrameView and MSI Afterburner's Reaver Tuner. Watch Dogs Legions is a similarly positive story, with 74 frames a second on average at 1440p high settings with ray tracing enabled. Once again, this was using the game's inbuilt benchmarking mode, so if you'd like to check these results for yourself at home, see what numbers you can achieve, you're more than able to do so. Call of Duty's Black Ops Cold War is next, and at 1440p high settings with DLSS enabled, we got 142 frames a second. Not a bad result, and we will of course jump onto Warzone in just a minute. First though, Apex Legends. Here we got an impressive 204 frames per second at 1440p high, with solid 90 and 99th percentile results to give you esports level frame rates at 1440p high settings. Valorant then is the next game today, and at 1440p high once again, we got 358 frames a second on average, with 302 and 282 for the 90 and the 99th percentile results. But that's an easy game to run on this 3070 Ti. What about a more difficult title? Well, I present to you Cyberpunk. At 1440p medium settings with ray tracing and DLSS disabled, we got 70 frames per second on average, and visually the game looked stunning. It is of course super difficult to run, still pretty buggy, but it works really well on this system at that higher resolution, which is always amazing to see. What about Fortnite though? A game that no matter how powerful the system is, you guys always ask to see. Well, I'm glad to announce that at 1080p competitive settings, so that's everything tuned down to low but the render distance set to far, we got 214 frames per second, with 190 and 163 for the 90 and the 99th percentile results. Wrapping things up then with Call of Duty's Warzone, the final gaming benchmark on my list today, and at 1440p high settings we got just over 125 frames a second on average. Of course, the latest DLSS 2.0 update really helping us when it comes to a bit more frame rate in Call of Duty's Warzone. And on that note, that pretty much wraps it up for not only the benchmarks but the whole video today. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, we'll see you in the next one.